Hey guys, this is Bradifer. I wanted to show you a Pauper deck that I've been having some fun with, basically just calling this Mono Black Zombies. We've tried different iterations of the deck, and I've kind of boiled it down to this so far. The goal of the deck was basically try to get some value out of Ghoul-Caller's Chant, which is a black, return 2 zombies to your hand from your graveyard, or return a single creature, but the idea is to do zombies. So you get this, we're down to 3, because 4 is just, you get them too often, they're useless. And you've got 4 Nameless Inversion, which is basically Black Bolt. And these count as zombies, so you can pull them back with Ghoul Chant or with Ghoul Raiser, who's just he's a 2/2 that pulls a random zombie. So sometimes you get a removal spell when you don't want it, or sometimes you get like a random dude when you needed the removal spell. But sometimes you can just get Ghoul Raiser, and then they kill your Ghoul Raiser, and you do another Ghoul Raiser and a Ghoul Raiser, and just the chain between Ghoul Raiser and the Chant is pretty hard for a lot of decks to deal with. So here's the deck is kind of weird. We've got Carrion Feeder. So he's black. He's just a 1/1. He can't block is the main thing about him. It's actually quite bad that he can never block. But he allows you to actually put some pressure on. Just turn 1 Carrion Feeder, turn 2 Butcher's Goal, who's an Undying 1/1. Attack with the Feeder as a 1/1, sack them, sack the Ghoul, make it a 2/2. Then you have 2 2/2s. That's not bad. That's basically like Goblins, right? 2 2/2s on turn 2. Then yeah, you're basically doing what Goblins is doing. I've had that start come very often. Just turn 1 Carrion Feeder, turn 2 Butcher's Ghoul, swing for 2. Then you're attacking for 4 every turn. And that's when your opponent starts playing. They're playing their own bolts, or their Seagate Oracles, or Muldrifters, or maybe they're a creature deck. If they're a creature deck, we've got 3 Edicts, 4 Nameless Inversions, and these 2 Unmakes. These 2 Unmakes are supposed to be Oubliette, but XMage doesn't have it in here because Oubliette is a lot more complicated than Oblivion Ring. It has all that stuff about exiling auras and stuff like that on it. So, anyways, so that's just one part of the deck. That's kind of the aggro part. And I think the aggro part was sort of necessary because if we're just being a straight mid-range control deck, mono black control is probably just better. So we're trying to get some synergy here and trying to make the deck reward off synergy. Some more synergy we've got. Viscera Dragger, mainly this guy just cycles for 2 and then allows us to get use out of Ghoul Raiser and Ghoul Caller's Chant. Sometimes they're just sitting in your hand and you're like, you get real clunky hands where you're only at 3 mana and your Ghoul Raiser takes 3 mana. It's just not the most impactful turn. But you can also unearth him for 2, which makes him a 3/3 haste, and then he exiles at the end of turn. So if you have a Carrion Feeder out and you spend your turn, 3 or 4 unearthing this guy after you've already cycled him, you can just sack him to the feeder to grow him 1 more. Just the feeder is there to basically add an aggressive element to this control deck. It's something your opponent does have to keep guys back to block for. They do have to chain energy, they do have to bolt it. They have to do something to get rid of it. Otherwise, it's going to keep hitting them for 1, 2, or 3, and they'll die from that. It forces them to kind of play some defense because he can get to a pretty annoying size pretty quickly. And they see you're cycling it. They see what you're doing, but it just allows you to get some aggression in there. 4 Gray Merchants. Now, we only have 21 lands, so it seems like... And yeah, sometimes he does just sit in your hand. And if you have to discard him due to hand size, just because you don't have enough mana, I've had that happen before, that's fine. Just drop him in the yard, and you can... if you're getting... If you're not getting flooded, if you're getting mana screwed, at some point you'll get out of it, and if you haven't lost the game yet, then you'll have Chants and Ghoul Raisers to pull back all the Gray Merchants you could want, and you could just chump with these if you're having to block Anglers or something. With the Gray Merchants, it's not as good as in Mono Black. There's no Witches. There's no there's supposed to be Oubliette, but not in this version. But there's no Witches to have the double black on turn 2, but just Gray Merchant into Carrion Feeder with Butcher's Ghoul. That's ping for 4, and he's a zombie. That's not bad. It allows you to keep board presence. And if they do kill everything, you've got all this recursion. You've got a pretty good engine here between Nameless Inversion and the 2 recursive spells that you can grind your way through a lot of decks. Gray Merchant does have a pretty good purpose here. He gives us a way to live versus the other aggressive decks, just like in Mono Black Control. Just anytime he hits the board, he's pretty impressive. Twisted Abomination. So this is where the deck takes a big turn. Like if this is some sort of aggro deck, you don't play 6 drops, right? It's not really the idea. But having 3 of these that we can cycle and pull back with our recursion is one of the reasons we can run a lower land count. We're down at 21, but these guys guarantee that we cycle into a land. And then late game, you're ideally never going to be pulling these guys back, between turns like 4 through 7. You're not going to be until turn like 8, 9, 10 when you have extra mana. You can actually play this guy without regeneration mana up because you'll eventually draw more recursion. If you're not dying, then eventually you can just get this guy into play. If you've ever had to play against this guy in a control deck, he's pretty insane. The fact that he can just keep regenerating, he can block Gurmag Angler all day, as long as you've got at least one regeneration mana. He is afraid of edict effects and sacrificing, but you got enough creatures in this deck that you can kind of work around that. And again, if they do kill him, you can just potentially use some of your recursion later on to pull him back. So we have 3 for now. I'm not sure if we should have 4 Draggers and only 2 of these, but I guess we'll find out. 1 Gurmag Angler, man, he's just insane, but he's not nearly as good as he is in Mono Black Control because you kind of want your graveyard cards. Like, you want to be able to get value out of all your recursion. So if you're exiling your zombies, then it's got a problem. I don't think I mentioned 4 Sign in Blood. I think the original version of this deck that I saw ran 4 Sign in Blood and 4 Read the Bones. And if you don't know Read the Bones, it's like a big Sign in Blood. You scry 2, draw 2, and then lose 2 life, so it's like a better Sign in Blood, but it costs more, and you just don't need that much draw power. The deck's already kind of clunky, and with all the recursion, it's got card advantage built in. Sign in Blood just helps smooth your land drops. It's just a way to get card advantage, and it's cheap. Okay, we come down to the sideboard. I've got 3 Duress for the control matchups. You need to be able to strip counterspells from their hand. 3 Witches. You don't really need to run these main because they'll kill your own feeders and your own butcher's ghouls. They just don't do that much work for your deck, and they're not zombies either. But you pull them out of the sideboard, your opponent won't be expecting them. In any deck that's trying to enchant up a creature, or that's just playing 1/1s like elves or tokens or delvers, even Stompy, this card is such a brick wall and just kills so many decks in the format. Choking Sands for Tron, 4 of these. You can also use these against control. We'll have to see exactly how the pile lines up. But killing their bounce Karoo lands really sets them back. And we've got 3 Tendrils in here. I don't know exactly what this spot should be, but 3 Tendrils plus 4 Gray Merchants gives us about the same chance we had in Mono Black Control versus the burn decks. This also helps versus other aggressive decks, with Goblins and whatever else you might face. Not really sure about the sideboard so far. 1 Wrench Mine just for burn and control decks, and then a single Spell Bomb for other graveyard decks and Tortured Existence. This deck has no way to beat the Tortured Existence deck other than just quickly aggroing it out. So between the 3 Chainers and the 2 Unmakes, which are supposed to be Oubliettes, that's 5 ways main deck to get rid of big blockers like Gurmag Angler or other Gray Merchants. I think it's just important to have some number of those because the format is full of Angler. These nameless inversions will be killing basically everything else. So you needed... the Edicts are also super necessary versus all the hexproof decks, which are starting to crop up more because of Tron. Which these effects also help kill the Fangren Marauders and Crushers and stuff like that. Let's try the deck out and see how it goes.